I used to speak German, but not anymore. I can sprechen nur ein bisschen Deutsch.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but maybe tonight, after some beers, I'll be able to speak a little more.
Yeah, there are some German hormones in the beer.
Is that right? The way I think of it is, for us, we put a lot of things in the bucket that is ARC. And it's kind of a weird, when I think back on it, we probably might have been better served had we said, we're going to make a GPU, we're going to make a basic GPU. We're going to make a basic GPU first. We might have gotten that done sooner. But instead we said, we're going to make a GPU that can compete with the best of the current generation of GPUs. That means it's got to have ray tracing, it's got to have XeSS, it's got to have good media. And so that grew our work list considerably, and that explains to some degree where we are. $750 and $770 will be available on launch day. And what we said is that this card, which is so nice. This is the ARC 770 limited edition.
That's another question.
Yeah. Well, this card is going to be available directly from Intel in both e-tail and retail in key countries when we launch. And I would say they're probably going to be available coincident, I hope, with work partners, but for sure from Intel.
Great, okay. I think Germany is one of the key countries.
I believe so.
Great.
Well, 3060 is on all my charts, right?
Okay, so that's the A750. What about the A770?
I'd say A770 is going to be above in both price and perf, right? So think of it as, I would say A770 is a bit of a tweener between a 3060 and a 3060 Ti. And I believe on the AMD side it's 6400, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
6600 on the AMD side.
Okay, maybe XT.
Maybe yes, 600 XT, yeah.
Okay.
We cannot really change dramatically our performance. We can improve it a little bit, and we can't really change our costs, but we can control our price, right? And so what we've said is that we are going to be very competitive when we launch, which means that we're going to deliver compelling per dollar versus all competition.
So that I'm laughing. I have to think about you at Steve.
Oh yeah.
You will humbly kick ass or something.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, humbly kick ass.
Yeah.
Well, it's because, the truth is that Intel's got a huge advantage here in the sense that this is our first entry and we all have expectations of, effectively getting into the market, and we'll do what it takes to get into the market. But it's a tough nut, right? When you're entering a new business, it's going to take a long time of consistent execution and building trust with both our partners and our customers, and we know that. And the first step is, hey, we have to deliver a compelling value proposition. And in the ARC generation, I think that means we're going to accept lower margins than we otherwise would. Limited edition is just sort of our brand. It doesn't mean like here today, gone tomorrow. It means it's direct from Intel. And it's an Intel design, Intel manufactured. It's manufactured in Malaysia. It's inventoried and shipped worldwide. And it's our expression of what we think is the best board that we can build for highlighting the A770 and the A750. So this is stock.
This is stock. Okay, so what the AIBs they can raise the clocks, the power limit.
They can, yeah. The AIBs can develop their own SKUs, and they of course get certified through Intel. We check to make sure that all the clock specs are accurate and that the SKU makes sense. But they can do power overclocking, they can do margin overclocking. But we do certify certain characteristics. I would say ours is meant to be very, very, very light touch. Right, and it's really just trying to help everybody figure out how do you build differentiated SKUs, because it's actually kind of complicated. So we're not doing so much as pushing AICs or AIBs to a particular design points or price points. Instead, we're just saying, does your firmware work? Do your clocks work? Is your fan good? We're good. That kind of stuff.
Talking about VRAM, I think I saw the 16 on some slides, but not on every slide. So
yeah.
PC games hardware readers like VRAM. So
yeah, it's very confusing. Okay, it's very confusing. So this card, which is the A770 limited edition from Intel, has 16 gigabytes on it.
Only. Only 16?
Only 16 gigahertz, right? Now the 750 has 8 gigs on it. So what we're saying is that the SKU, the ARC A770, supports both an 8 gig configuration and a 16 gig configuration. What we're going to be launching with the Intel branded card is the 16 gig edition. Our 16 gigabyte pricing is aggressive. How about that?
What do we mean bad?
No, I mean it's aggressively good. Aggressively good. It's you would not expect us to price the 16 gigabyte version as aggressively as we're going to.
Okay, nice.
And what's a high clock for a GPU today?
3 gigahertz.
Who's running 3 gigahertz? Who's got that?
Let's talk teraflops. How many teraflops does this?
Ooh, teraflops.
Yeah.
Let's see. You want me to tell you peak flops, and you're just going to divide by clock. That's right. No, sir, I cannot play that game. I think we can say. Can we say above 2 gigahertz?
Yes.
We can say above 2 gigahertz.
Ah, come on, it's more.
It's more. It is. And it's above. Yeah, it's about 2 gigahertz. And then, can we say what the highest clock you've ever seen? No. I mean, we can. Right? We can. Yeah. So we were playing with overclocking. Now, overclocking is not indicative of obviously every GPU, but I did think we saw just for a briefest moment. But we probably don't want to say it because it's going to set expectations too high, right? But we saw some very high clocks.
Okay, but still with the 2 at the...
2 is the bottom. 2 is the bottom, right? I would expect.
Yeah, the one we saw still had a 2 at the front as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still,
Yes,
but,
front.
yeah, it's pretty high.
Okay.
In the version that Garnier has, I suspect that there's not, but in the version of firmware and stuff that you're going to get.
Are you sampling the MSI Afterburner created?
You know what? We have made our Control API public. So if you go on, I think there's a GitHub repository for Control API, and that is effectively equivalent to NV API and to, I forgot what AMD's is called. But
ADM, I think.
Yeah, ADM. And that's what Afterburner uses. So it's kind of up to Afterburner, and I forgot the name of the original guys who did it here. It was Alex, maybe? Maybe? Yeah.
Anwender, I think it's his name.
Yeah, Sidewinder guy, yeah. But I think it's Alex, it's Sidewinder guy.
Yeah,
So
I think
I think he knows how to do it. And I haven't reached out to him yet about, hey, you should do an update to support ARC, but I will. I have a new tool coming that I think is going to be pretty competitive. Not with Afterburner, but just, there's a software genius that I hired who lives in Tokyo, and we've been working on how do you do a really good overlay? Like, what would be a really good overlay? It would basically be a high quality render that's done in kind of like a high performance mode. And so he's developed his own 2D rasterizer for overlays. It's really cool.
TGP. Can you tell us the power for the GPU?
For the GPU,
For the GPU only?
GPU only.
For the reference cards.
For this
We got
card,
3 cards in.
let's see. So I think the way to think about it, we said 195 for this.
I think so. Well, it's 225 board.
225 total board power.
Also, let's confirm that the final I think it's...
The peak is 225. So peak is 225.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's 195 by stock, but we'll get you the real specs on that. There's a little bit of inaccuracy in the way we're reporting power today because of our actual measurement is on the output of the voltage regulator.
Okay.
So if you think about it, it gets a little complicated about what are we reporting and what are we saying. Our spec might be slightly different from what we're reporting simply because of that voltage regulator difference.
Okay, so the numbers in our control are not...
They're off by a little bit. I'm looking at whether to add an offset to those numbers to account for the fact that it's on the output of the voltage regulator instead of the input. But it's a small thing. Oh, well, I do think the power connectors will be moving forward. I know the one that just came out, did that get ratified in an EATX 3.0 spec, the new power connector? Do you know?
I think so, yes.
So that's a power supply connector spec.
16 pin.
Yeah, I think as we move forward with our GPUs, but I don't think that's the end of connectors. I mean, if you look at that thing, it's better, but it's not dramatically better. And there's other things that we could do. I also don't like the location where most people are putting it. I mean, I'd really rather just have another block here. Right? Now the problem is if you put a block here, how do you get the power supply to go there? But you already know that the motherboards have specs for power supply connectors, right? So since Intel is the dominant motherboard reference provider, the real solution is now that Intel has a graphics company, maybe we just say, we're going to expand the motherboard, right? So we don't have to be constrained by, there's a GPU that doesn't have control over the motherboard ecosystem. If I were going to do this right, I would say, okay, what do we want down on the motherboard? We would like to have a PCI Express fingers, but wouldn't it be great if there was like a standardized clunk, and now you get your you get your power supply delivery, and then just like on a motherboard where you have that 10 pan, you might have a 16 pan that is the ATX motherboard, GPU motherboard power rack. So that's just an idea. We're not working on that right now, but I'm just saying that this 10-pin thing right here, that's a good idea. It's better than doing lots of 6s. But I think that's the power of having an ecosystem at Intel where we can start thinking about what's really the right solution.
So about the Intel branded cards, I can buy them everywhere you partner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think about Intel branded cards, we're going to be limited volume when we initially launch. And that makes just sense given where we are. We've got to make sure everything that we've done works for all of our board partners and all of our channel partners. And volume's going to build over time as we have success. So we're going to build a bunch. We're going to put them into retail and e-tail in our key countries. We're going to encourage everybody to get out there and get them in limited quantities. And if everything goes well as expected, there'll be more and more and more and more. We have plenty of GPUs.
Can you talk about the AIBs that have confirmed to work with Intel?
I can't. That is really up to the AIBs to decide when to talk about what they're doing. I can say that we obviously want to work with every AIB that is qualified to build a graphics card like this, and we've certainly engaged all of them. So.
Mining. Please tell us mining sucks on Arc.
You know what? Have you done it? No. Have you done it? I've heard that there has been a report of A380 mining, and it wasn't great.
Okay.
But the truth is, I think these will mine, but I think I've already said I don't expect the perf per watt of this to be dramatically better than a 3060. So the perf per watt is probably actually a little bit below 3060, which means that if you wanted to mine, you'd be much better off getting a 3060. And I know that 3060 is relatively ungood at Ethereum. It's less than awesome, right? So I don't think we're going to be a very good miner.
The game on drivers.
Yes.
Can we expect major releases for every big game, or what's the schedule?
Well, of course, our intention is to do major releases before big games, right? We don't want people to download their games and try it on Arc and find that they don't have a driver. So that's a challenge. We have to have all the dev tech and all the dev rel, and that's definitely a muscle that we're building. And that's our intention. Is there's a limited number of titles that we can be ready for on the day of launch. It can't be every title. That's a little bit too much. But for the big titles, we'll be ready on the day of launch, or it'll be a mistake. So think of it as our intention is to be ready on day of launch, and sometimes there'll be issues that happen, but we'll work through them.
Okay, so we can't expect a monthly schedule like AMD.
Does AMD do now a monthly cadence?
At least one per month.
At least one per month. And I would expect our cadence is going to be roughly monthly, but again, it'll change based on big title availability. And so think of it as the thing that drives us is aligning with the big titles, and also roughly monthly.
And how do you ensure performance and compatibility with indie games?
Oh, that's a tough nut, right? There's 10,000. How many? What's the latest number on Steam every year? Is it 1,000? I think it's 1,000 titles on Steam every year, right? So until we have an installed base that people can easily get hold of our graphics cards and we can incent indies to test roll their graphics card, it's going to be a very difficult challenge. But the truth is, APIs help us to some degree, right? DX11, DX12, if people follow those standards, it should work on our graphics cards. You know what the big challenge is? I'm gonna share the big challenge. Some people don't follow those specs. Some people just do DX without really reading the specs, and they find out that there's a problem by running it on an NVIDIA graphics card. So what it means is that there's an installed base of NVIDIA compliant games, not really DX compliant games. And so that's obviously something that we have to work through over years, and it gets fixed by educating and by improving the APIs, but also by having an install base.
Talking about ARC control. Is there a rough roadmap for features? Something?
There is. The whole ARC control team is constantly working on both stability and quality and features. And it's sort of like they have to learn how to guarantee great experiences, because it's been rocky right out of the get-go, as you know, right? And so we're cleaning up all that, and yet we still want them to do more. So it's tough, but they're going to get there.
I think they're working day and night.
They are working a lot. Yeah, and the improvement very quickly has been pretty dramatic. I don't know if you got a hold of the early builds, but they're much better.
Much better, yeah. Two options in ARC control I stumbled upon were driver boost and game compatibility. What does it mean?
Oh, interesting. So game compatibility has a couple of sub-options underneath it. And the idea is that during our QA and our game validation, as we started testing these long polls, we found a few of these things that game developers do that are non-compliant. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, well, maybe we can have a workaround for some of these non-compliant game things.
Do you have an example? Sorry.
Do I have an example? I don't know off the top of my head examples. But we do kind of think of it as some of these compatibility bits are turned on by profiles that we've identified. So under the covers, you don't even know that these compatibility bits are being manipulated. So the idea is, hey, there's this long tail of titles that we don't know about. Why don't we give a switch that if it's not working for you, you can try these options. We haven't gotten to profile that title yet, but here's a way for you to see if some of these backup plans might have worked.
Okay, so how can I imagine this? The game crashes or the game has visual corruption,
Yep.
and I turn it on advanced and it works?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and then the reason that's there is the reason it wouldn't be on is because there's usually a performance trade-off.
Yeah.
Right, so we want to run with our high performance modes that we think work on and should work on every title, but there's going to be some titles that are not behaving in an expected way. And rather than have no solution for the end user, we said, why don't we make some of these switches that we use internally available? And that's effectively the idea. Now, we haven't publicized it very much because it's sort of a power user thing, and we want most people to never, ever have to think about that.
Yeah, but you can turn it on and off.
You can turn it on and try it.
Sorry,
You might want to try that on your DX8 game. Yeah.
I could, yes.
I'm curious if it works. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious.
So what would you recommend? Advanced?
Yeah. So I would try them all.
Okay.
Because they're all different. They're all doing different things. So you might think of it as there's different software optimizations that happen inside, and they're all kind of random, but you got to give them some name, right?
Okay.
So the idea is, how do we bundle together these groups of things?
Could we get a list of things that I've done?
Can we do a blog on this?
Interesting thoughts. The game compatibility flag.
Let me talk about it. We haven't really exposed all those different things, but think of it as things like loop unrolling. Like how would you do, or maybe it's something like caching. Great, I love it. Where did you find that?
Upper right in the game.
You know what? I gotta check that out.
Sorry, I have a picture.
You know what? I don't know everything. This is a great example where. Find out what's driver boost. That's fun.
I can show you everything I've tested with the.
Yeah, I want to see driver boost.
Outcast. It's another old
What's
game.
it called?
Oh, Outcast. Driver boost. Do you know what that is? Incredible. This is great. Right off the.
Yeah. It's German, but it's
Oh wow! And what does that AUS mean? Off or on?
It's off. It's off per default.
Uh-huh.
And this
And
is
did you mouse over the question mark?
Unfortunately not.
Damn.
No. I think it tells about dynamic optimizations going on. And
All right. Well, I see somebody gave a name to something.
Is that the maybe the label that it shows up as for the benchmark?
Might be. Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
but it's in global game settings.
Yeah. I think I want to make sure I get the right
Yeah, I'd
answer.
wait
So
to
let's
see.
follow up on that. I could speculate like I do often, but in this case, I want to pretend that I'm going to get you a better answer.
Yeah, it's okay. Stick
Maybe
to
by
facts.
dinner tonight. We'll know.
Yeah. Yeah, some software things. Can we force anisotropic filtering?
Can you force AF?
Yes, I know we can force it, but which API do you know this?
Ooh. I don't know. I think it's OpenGL primarily, but I'm not sure.
Okay, and not even DX9
I
either.
think so, but again, I can we check on that? AF override doesn't work across DX. I think it's mostly OpenGL.
I think it's a hack if you do it on DX12 and Vulkan, but yeah,
It might work.
it might work.
You never know.
Yeah. Okay, rebar.
Oh,
Nice topic. Yeah. What's the status?
what's the status? Well, let's start off with we have a special memory controller. And the special, and I mean that in kind of like the best possible way, right? It's very good at doing bursty transactions and less good at not doing bursty ones. So long transactions, it's very efficient. Short transactions, less efficient. So normally that wouldn't be a big deal, but it turns out that the way PCI Express works, and this has been the way it is forever, it generally forces writes from the CPU to GPU memory to be small transactions. And what turning on rebar does is it says, hey, I'm a modern system, I've got a modern CPU, a modern GPU, let's let these transactions be big. And so we did not communicate clearly at the beginning that we need people to turn rebar on. It's available in all of our current chipsets and all of our competitor chipsets on all of our CPUs that have launched since Gen 10? Gen 10.
But also maybe you have an older PC like whatever 2010. You would like to upgrade your GPU. So these people you have to tell don't buy Arc.
Yeah, it's definitely the case that Arc is going to be less optimal on older PCs. That's no question. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, everything will still work, of course, but the performance impact I think we've publicized, depending on the title, it can be big. It can be like up to 35, 40%, right? So at the end of the day, what I've told anybody is if you don't have rebar on, probably Arc is not the right GPU for you. Now, that's probably not always going to be the case. I suspect that as we come from Alchemist moving forward to Battlemage and Celestial, we'll revisit, is there a way to get a better behavior when we have short transactions?
Okay, that's a nice info. So it won't change with Alchemist, but maybe with
it could in the future, but Alchemist definitely won't change. Now, there's work going on inside our driver team to make it less impactful, more close to what it's like for other GPU vendors. But that's a distant wish right now. Our best advice is if you have an older platform that doesn't have the ability to turn rebar on, stick with another vendor.
And we're also making sure that consumers are aware if rebar is on or off on their system.
Yeah, you'll see in future versions of our software messages coming out to say, hey, we noticed that you don't have rebar on. We really think you should.
okay, like a toast message.
Yeah, like a toast.
It already can show. Arc Control can show if rebar is.
Yeah, we want to make it a more
Gotta be more
proactive
in your
state.
Yeah.
Like during
Don't forget.
installation or during when you're every time you start a game or you just don't do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, your system is too old. Don't
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. But at the end of the day, we want to be transparent. Right? We want people to know.
Yeah, okay. And to be realistic, I think Battlemage won't change it because it's already in production. Maybe not production, but
I never say
testing.
never on Battlemage. We're definitely aware of the issue. It'd be best if we didn't have it, but it's a trade-off, right? What percentage of performance uplift do we get by having a memory controller that's optimized for bursts versus, would it be better if we supported all different memory transaction sizes?
Okay, about some other features. Smooth string.
Smooth sync.
Yeah, smooth sync. Very different for the German.
It's hard to say. Is that hard to smooth sync?
Smooth sync is the
That's hard. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Smooth sync.
Yeah. So how does it work?
The way to think about it is frames are rendered with VSync off, and you're just kind of tearing. So if you look at one of these screens, it's tearing all the time. And what Smooth Sync does is it says, instead of tearing, how about I blend? Okay.
Yeah, but how does it work?
Well, we have a display engine, and the display engine is responsible for saying, I'm scanning out of this location in memory, it's reading memory, and then it's going to convert it to pixels and write it on DisplayPort or HDMI. That display block has the ability to look at both locations in memory. Mm-hmm. So it can read from the old frame and the new frame simultaneously and do a dither. Right? And as it gets further from the old frame to the new frame, that dither pattern changes, but it's all done in the display block. So think of it as there's pretty much no latency impact because
pretty much okay.
yeah, like almost imperceptible, I'd say less than a scan line. Mm-hmm. And effectively all you're doing is you're reading an extra line from memory, and then the total time it takes to read 2 lines, buffer it up, do the dither is approximately nothing compared to everything else that's going on in the GPU. So I suspect you might be able to measure it, but I bet you won't.
I can measure, but I can't feel it.
Yeah, you definitely, well, you might not be able to measure it, but you definitely can't feel it. Yeah. Okay. So the interesting part about this technology is it's basically free in terms of performance, and it does soften those tearings. I don't know if you've been able to turn it on an A380, and have you experienced it yourself at all, or not so much?
I've seen some bad results on YouTube. I think it was Steve again.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I didn't try it.
Okay. Well, I think it was somewhat busted on his particular case of bad
His drivers
interactions.
fixed it.
Yeah, bad interactions with VSync, transitioning from off to on to on. We didn't do that all correctly in the driver. That's all been fixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the recent drive? Okay.
Yeah, the one posted last Friday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so try it again.
3268, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, our driver, our rate of progress, and I say this is all about getting feedback directly from the market. Because if you think about engineering, we've been working on this for some time, and the rate of progress has been steady. But now when somebody kicks you in the face, your rate of progress is much, much faster somehow. I don't know how that works. That hurts. Direct storage, yeah, very important.
Yep. Okay. So that's all you have to say.
Well, we're working on a solution for direct storage, and Microsoft is obviously a key part of that. I don't really have anything to say about it right now, but I do expect us to have a pretty compelling, performant, standardized DirectX performance implementation.
Okay, so the hardware is ready, but the software is not.
It's all software, right?
It's all software?
Well, I mean, the whole how do you do direct storage? It takes advantage of encoding capabilities on the hardware,
Yeah.
but that's pretty standardized.
Okay.
And so really what we're talking about is how do we, which algorithms are the right algorithms, what works for us and others, and how can we cooperate to standardize? This is very similar to the conversation, about post-effect standardization and how do we make these things work together across multiple vendors from multiple game developers. Direct storage is no different.
Okay. What about HDMI 2.1?
HDMI 2.1. So right now, we are not HDMI 2.1 natively on the silicon.
The silicon does not support, it supports HDMI 2.0,
So it's not. Okay.
but the card supports HDMI 2.1
Yeah.
through Pecan.
So there's a Pecan on this card, and I don't know if you can see it. You
It's
can't see
fine.
it. You'll see it on the board breakdown we do on the board breakout. But the Pecan basically takes in, I think, a display
It's a
port.
display port.
Yeah, and then outputs actually HDMI 2.1.
Okay, nice
Yeah.
trick.
Yeah.
And that's going to be up to, so if any add-in card partners, they have to decide if they want to integrate.
It is on the reference design, but of course it's up to board vendors will
It's in
vary.
the reference. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. XeSS.
Yes.
It works on Intel,
Yes.
but the developers can decide not to support DP4A.
Yes.
Okay, so
And they
how
can-
likely is this?
Well, that's totally up to the developer. Our SDK supports both.
Okay.
Right? And to some degree, some developers have said, hey, listen, unless you support both, we don't want to do it. But the truth is, I think most vendors are going to do both DLSS and XeSS. because if you're doing the integration for one, why wouldn't you do the other? But there are some vendors that kind of say, well, why not enable everything for everybody? So they're doing that. Exactly.
That's a great thing. XeSS runs on different GPUs and not just NVIDIA's. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that like AMD does not have an equivalent solution today. So it's maybe more appropriate for an AMD user to say, hey, I'd like to see what XeSS looks like. But and then maybe I don't know if the Digital Foundry guys are going to do this, but you could compare DLSS, FSR, and XeSS and say,
They will.
I know they will. I know they will. Yeah.
And we will too.
I hope you do. I hope you do. I feel pretty good about it. Yeah.
Okay. The question that came to my mind when I saw this, the XeSS resolutions. So can you tell us the resolutions?
Well, let's see.
Maybe?
720p is performance,
Okay.
right?
So it's a quarter of the.
I believe. Yeah. So I don't know the actual.
The resolution is set by your output resolution.
Well,
Not by,
so there's two questions. What is the output resolution, and how does it compare to your input resolution?
Yep.
Right.
You gotcha.
So I don't know if I know precisely those ratios.
And maybe two.
Yeah.
Performance.
So I know, say, there's one example where it's 720p to 1440p. And there's another example when it's 1080p going to 1440p. But I don't know exactly which those are.
Okay, so I think performance is 4x. So it's 1540p and 720p. Yeah.
I believe that's about right. Yeah. So 720p would be 1/4.
Okay, so it's like DLSS performance.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I believe you. I believe you.
Why should people use XeSS instead of DLSS or FSR2?
That's a very good question. I think it's really the first thing is what's your GPU optimized for. So if your GPU supports DLSS, I will probably expect people to prefer DLSS on an NVIDIA card than XeSS on an NVIDIA card.
Depends on quality, I think.
Yeah, it depends on the quality and the performance, right? But what we've said is that we've written a DP4A version of XeSS for NVIDIA. Now, NVIDIA obviously could take that DP4A implementation and write their own, what is it called? What's their equivalent of XMX? They've got a name for it. Their systolic thing.
Oh.
The tensor cores?
Yeah, the tensor cores. So they could obviously do a tensor implementation.
NVIDIA some years before.
You heard I was there? I've forgotten all of that. Yeah. So that they could obviously write a tensor core version that would work on XeSS because it's open. I cannot imagine them ever doing that, right? So basically they're going to say, DLSS is the solution for NVIDIA, XeSS is the solution for Intel, and FSR2 is the solution for AMD. But you know what? We're making it available for users to pick.
Yeah, it's great to have you can choose. So I think it depends on quality because if XeSS looks better, then
why wouldn't you? The problem I think is that our implementation of DP4A is going to be a performance challenge versus NVIDIA's implementation that's based on tensor cores, right? So the question is, how does the perf quality? What do the perf quality equations really look like?
Yeah, but you can imagine things like DLSS tends to smear. So if XeSS does
not smear as much, yeah. It could be.
Does not smear as much?
I don't think so. I mean, it's really like it's you pick your test case, you pick your sensitivity, and I think there's going to be a million opinions here. That's why actually I'm looking forward to talking to Richard, right, and see like his eyes are better than mine.
Okay.
My eyes say it looks pretty damn good, and I've looked at it a lot.
Okay.
So I'm pretty confident.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have maybe the last question about the launch date. So soon. With how many O's?
It's
How many O's?
I would say, well, we want to meet our commitments, and that means it's got to be soon.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, that's the last one. The launch about the A380. It looked quite messy, but China first, US now, I think, and EU now. So why? What was the real reason?
For A380?
Yeah.
I think it was just, we had some false assumptions about how that would go. And we didn't have a good read on our quality. And we didn't have a good understanding that, the whole world is global. and nothing that you do in any particular country is going to stay in that particular country. So our strategy was, let's start very small and controlled and work through our learning process there, and then we'll ramp as we get to the bigger GPUs and the bigger markets and things like that. That was a terrible idea. It didn't work at all. And
Kind of worked.
yeah, no, it's a terrible idea. It didn't work at all.
Yeah. I mean, it clearly didn't work the way that it was expected to run, right? But I think the idea of starting small, contained, right? You know,
System integrator first.
the original plan was system integrator first, so you could say we know what systems these are getting plugged
The
into.
idea was to
But
reduce the surface.
never underestimate the
Power of the
power of the press to
I hear
ship cards across the
that
globe.
FedEx ships globally.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew, right? Yeah, so that's on us.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was nice.
Great to see you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.